Alright, so I have my layout design in Photoshop. I like it. I have the, here's what it looks like when the panels open up, and then here's where it's closed, and here's my mouse over look on the buttons there. Okay, so to get into Flash, there's a couple things I can do. I could like cut out pieces of this and like have JPEGs and almost build it like an HTML website inside of Flash. I could try and do it in like Starling using sprite sheets or something like that. That would be pretty code heavy and not necessary. I don't really need the performance gain of going with something like Starling. And then cutting it out into pieces would really kind of bloat the file size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and recreate the design inside of Flash with the least amount of file size possible. So what I'm going to need is these patterns that I used to make this design. Okay, but it's kind of hard because you want a pattern, right? So let's say, let me just close all this stuff right now. I have this this document, and I really like this pattern right here. Okay, I want this pattern in Flash. So how do I get it? Right, doing this whole right. I want to make sure it lines up just right, and I want to make sure I'm not using too much. So if I did that, would it be the same? How would I cut out this pattern so that I could use it as a seamless texture? Well, actually, it's pretty simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in this pattern overlay. So this pattern I want is if I hover over this this selection, it tells me exactly how big the pattern is, 20 by 40 pixels. Excellent. Okay, so all I really need to do is Control N. I'm going to make a new document, 20 by 40. Right? Now if I make a layer and try and apply the style, the pattern, it's not going to be there because it's an empty layer. Right? So I want something, so you just copy the background, or you can double click on the background and turn it into a layer, and then we can apply the layer style. Right? So 20 by 40 was the size of this guy right here. Boom. And now I have my little pattern. So if I export that for the web, Control Shift Alt Save, right? Then JPEG's probably going to be my best bet size-wise. I'd probably even go pretty high because it's a small file. And then I'll save it wherever on the hard drive. I've already done this. I've saved my background pattern right there, so I don't need to do that. But now I have my pattern saved. So I'm going to go through, right, and save all the patterns I need. So next I need this sort of hexagonal pattern. So how big is that one? I think I use this one right here, 28 by 17. See, it's a real strange number sometimes, so you always want to check. And then same process, I go through it and make a new document, do that whole process again. Occasionally though, there'll be a pattern that isn't really that small, right? So another texture I wanted to use was this one right here, and that's 1024 by 1024. That's a pretty big pattern. So I don't really want that big of a JPEG in my Flash document. So what's the smallest I need? Well, I use this pattern to kind of give this grunge look over the hexagons. So really I only need it to be as big as this little rectangle, essentially, on either side. And just because I cut it up, it's about 500 by 450. So what I would do is I just make a new document that size, 500, 450, right? And then I'll turn this into a layer, and then apply a layer style. We'll get a pattern, and we get our kind of grungy texture, right? You can move it around by just dragging right here. Before I knew how to do that, it would drive me crazy that I couldn't put it in the right spot. So I can just sort of drag it around, find a spot I like. See, I kind of like that. And then I would export this. Because I'm using it as an overlay texture, though, I don't really want too high of quality. So I might do, maybe 40, right? Maybe even lower, because I can't really see any of the artifacts in there. So it doesn't have to be very big or high quality. I mean, and then, I can save that as my background, right? So anyway, I went through and got all the textures I might need from here. Next, the buttons, right? I could try and recreate those, but I want some flexibility. I want to be able to change my buttons. So I'm going to actually have my website pull in these PNGs. I'm just going to have a bunch of different button pings, and I'll load them from an external source so that I can just change the way they look if I want. But to export it, so what I'd want to do, basically I don't want any background or anything. I want this, right? Is control, click on that, I get my selection, then image, crop, and I'll shrink it down. Now if I want the effect, see right now it's going to be cut off. I'm going to get like a square shape. So if I want the effect, I'm going to have to increase the canvas size. So Control Alt C brings up my canvas, or you go image canvas size, and I don't know, probably 10 or 15 pixels all the way around would get me there. So I just round up, so maybe 55 by I don't know, 90, and that way I can kind of capture my layer effect. I haven't decided if I want to apply the layer effect, or the glow rather, in Flash or in kind of pre-rendered Bake It, in the button. Doing it in Flash will just increase the overhead. It uses some processor and is kind of a little bit of bloat, but it might look better. Whereas doing it here, it's just a PNG. I import it. It's going to have the kind of glow around it and all that already, but it might not look as good. So I'll have to decide. So anyway, we get here. We're just going to save it again. You want to interlace it. That'll increase the size. It doesn't really improve the look of it. It's so small. It doesn't really matter. So, I can export all my buttons that way, or I could just do that again. So we have this tiny size, and then just disable the layer effect and export it that way. So I just have the straight up button. I might want actually the pattern overlay I have on there, just to help dull the hexagons. So anyway, go through all of that, get all my patterns, get all my buttons, whatever I might need. And then I'm gonna take it over to Flash.